Hi, my name is Beth Bienvenu. I am an arts administrator, a former federal employee, person who stutters, and right now I am the development director for the Global Alliance for Disability in Arts and Media. Yeah. So I have a background in arts management, a degree in arts administration, but when I got to DC, I ended up working for consulting firms. I ended up the Labor Department and then the Office of Disability Employment Policy, ODEP, which a lot of folks are familiar with because they sponsor the Job Accommodation Network and the EARN, the Employer Assistance Resource Network. So I worked for them, but I kept trying to get back into the arts, and the perfect position opened up in 2010 at the National Endowment for the Arts as the accessibility director. So I was there from 2010 until the end of May 2025. I left as the federal agencies were having cuts to their workforce, and all of the directors at the NEA were going to be terminated. So I was able to retire because I had had 20 years at that point. So that was good. But now that frees me up to do some freelance work, and I'm excited about helping the Global Alliance. Yeah, it's incredibly important because prior to the Rehabilitation Act and the ADA, people were not able to access the arts, to go into museums, to go into auditoriums. Either there were too many stairs, there was not accessible seating, there might not have been sign language or audio description. And so after the Rehabilitation Act was passed, and after the activists helped to get the regulations signed, the National Endowment for the Arts was the third of all federal agencies and the first small agency to get their regulations published, which was very exciting. I like to call that an inside the Beltway nerdy thing to celebrate. And of course, it's a celebration for the disability community because the National Council on the Arts charged the NEA staff to become leaders, to assume leadership in arts accessibility. And it did that over the next 45 years. And then in partnership with many, many partners in the community. And so it's just incredibly important. I know that access to healthcare and jobs and everything else and housing is incredibly important, but the arts are such an important part of our lives. They enrich our lives, they document our culture, and so many incredibly talented disabled artists who are expressing themselves and sharing their own culture and their stories and being able to tell those stories. So ensuring access is so hard. I think, I've spent most of my career focusing on government support for the arts. And I think that's why this period is so difficult, because it was a huge part of my own value system of what government can do and needs to do. It's incredibly important that the government supports people who need access to healthcare and housing and employment, and the arts and culture and libraries and everything else. So I think trying to bring back widespread support for the government to take a strong role, and they still are. The NEA is still doing really good work. National Endowment for the Humanities, Library of Congress, the state arts agencies and state humanities councils. If the budgets are cut, they are still doing that work. But I think, the federal, state, and local government has a very strong role to play in all of this. And I want to make sure that I would love to just make sure that everyone supports that.
Wow.
Just that, I mentioned earlier that it's important for people with disabilities to be able to tell their own stories. And that's why I like working for the Global Alliance for Disability in Arts, Media, and Entertainment, because it allows people to tell their stories and not rely on others to do so, and to do so in ways that are focused on pity or inspiration. And that's why this work is really important. And I hope that people can support that and help us find ways to do that work.